Yeah, I know we're a couple days late to the party on this one, but Desmond Bane got traded since the last time we had a show here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Welcome to the pod, everybody. I'm Dan Vespris. Hit that like and subscribe button. But honestly, today, if you're tuning into this channel, you're almost definitely tuning in for Noah and Matt cranking out the 2025 draft class rankings. That show popped up on our feed just a few hours ago, and it is that's the chef's kiss noise for those on the podcast, listening but not watching. It's a golden one. You got to go check that one out. If you're joining us for this one, it's a Desmond Bane show. We're going to do about 15, 20 minutes on the Desmond Bane trade to Orlando, break it down with obviously the caveat that more things could happen over the next couple of months leading up to the season. The Grizzlies may kind of detonate things a little bit farther. Probably the more interesting side of this is what's going on in Memphis, but we'll get to both right now. Here's the tweet from a few days back for Shams Charania, who is, again, now the sort of the lack of competition at the top. I think it was Kevin Durant that said he was, I forget what ball player was talking about how they miss Woj. I don't think it was KD. It was somebody else. Anyway, tweet from Shams. Breaking, the Memphis Grizzlies are trading Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic for Kentavious, Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and 1 first-round pick swap. Sources tell ESPN. This was, what day was this? This was the 15th, so this was 2 days ago. I know we're running behind. We didn't have a show yesterday. I have no excuse, really. I'm just throttling down in the offseason right now, so you guys are just going to have to deal with that, I guess. I don't know. No good excuses. Just not doing as many shows right now because I'm going to do 1,000 when leagues open up in August. We'll obviously do a lot of shows when free agency comes around as well. So let's start with the easy side of this, and that's Orlando, because they are the team that is consolidating. And consolidating is simple. Consolidating is limiting the number of bodies you have to worry about from a fantasy standpoint. So now we look at the Magic roster going into next year, and Desmond Bane immediately becomes one of the highest paid Magic. I actually think he is the highest paid Magic this coming year at $34 million. He's on a long deal. So this is part of the core. Jonathan Isaac was the second highest paid player this last year. His contract actually decreases in value. KCP was also a really big one. I say really big. That's not really fair, I guess. KCP was in the 20s. Cole Anthony was in the teens. You put those guys together, you basically get pretty close to what Desmond Bane's contract was. So that's why the numbers worked out pretty easily. Remove Kentavious, Caldwell-Pope, and Cole Anthony from the Magic roster, and you're basically left with the core, which is Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, who are still each on their rookie contract. Franz, I think, is now officially, actually, as of like a couple weeks from now, he'll no longer be on his rookie deal. So the Franz extension will kick in. He then becomes the highest paid player on the team in about 3 weeks. Jalen Suggs. Oh, how did I get that one wrong? Suggs also has a contract that kicks in this coming year as well. So that the payroll for the Magic is leaping fast from being pretty reasonable and in check to kind of being up a little bit closer to the big dogs. But the point of all of this is not necessarily payroll, because I'm not worried about what the Magic are going to do with what they have left, blah, 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 blah. I'm worried about what is there right now. And so Paolo is going to do a lot. Duh. That's the big no surprise one. Franz Wagner is going to do a lot, which is, I mean, you could basically call it a duh, but it's sort of like a semi-duh because Franz sort of ratcheted up his activity. I don't want to say only when Paolo went down, but it did take a very large leap forward when Paolo was hurt this past year. Banchero missing 30 ball games. This season overall, Banchero attempted 20 shots per game. 20.2 was the final number. And there's no reason to think that anything changes for him. He's the lead horse. The Wagner part is a little bit more nuanced, not by a ton, but he sort of had three portions to his season. There was the first couple of weeks of the year where he was in the high teens, mid to high teens in shots per game. There was the sort of middle month and a half where he was around 20 to 22 shots per game. Then there was the Paolo's back part where it came back down a little under 20. And then there was a large portion of the year for all of these guys where Jalen Suggs was out. And not that it was as large an impact, but he was taking 14 shots a game before he went down a little bit later on. So Franz had this big sweeping uptick in what he was doing per game, and then sort of like a gradual downtick after that. That's not to say that he's going to do a bunch less than 19 and a half shots per game, which is what this season finished at, but don't be surprised if it's more like 18 to 19 instead of 19 to 20. Just a little tick down with Paolo there and Suggs there, and now Desmond Bane there as well. And so that's where things get a little bit wonky. But before we get to the Desmond Bane side, what does it mean for the guys that are already in Orlando and part of the pretty obvious core, which I think you could also throw Wendell Carter Jr. in the mix? Whether you think Goga Batadze is a better fit at center for that team, Wendell's going to be the guy with the starting unit. He is faster. He's, on a team that is sort of lacking offense. That's one of the reasons they're going to lean that way. But again, he's not going to impact the usage stuff all that much. So let's just try to roll it all into a bucket. What was Desmond Bane doing this past year? The answer is a decent amount. He was taking 15 shots a game, less than the previous 2 years because there was more Jaren Jackson, more Ja Morant this season than the year prior. But a little bit more than what Bane did back in 2021, 2022, before he that was the breakout year for Bane, and then he just kept adding little by little as his teammates went down. This season kind of came back down to earth a little bit, attempted slightly fewer three-pointers, for better or worse, you call it what it is. Rebounding was way up because Memphis ran a smaller rotation, more JJJ at the 5 than in seasons past as well, because there's no JV, there's no Steven Adams. They went to a littler team by and large. And then the big jump for Bane over the last 2 to 3 years was that he became sort of the other, I don't say the other ball handler, but when Ja was not the distributor, it was Bane. And when it wasn't Bane or Ja, it was Scottie Pippen Jr. Fear not, we're going to loop back around to that side. Before we get to more on what's going down with Orlando, I want to remind you guys that this show, as all shows, brought to you by our buddies at Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all sports betting action. You got baseball in full swing. Shohei Ohtani is pitching again, friends. NBA Finals, 3-2. Thunder are out in front. And beyond that, UFC, boxing, tennis, NFL futures. Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest news, scores, sports wagering info, and even live in-game betting while the action is going on. BetOnline keeps the dog days of summer rolling. If you don't want to wait for a ball game, head down to the BetOnline casino. You can play all the top Vegas-style games, including poker, a live casino with other live beings, more than 20 different types of blackjack, and so many other games that I don't even understand. BetOnline, the game starts here. Check them out at BetOnline_AG on social media if you feel so inclined. The reason I was going through all these numbers, and Franz at 19 and a half shots per game, and Paolo at 20 shots per game, and Suggs at 14, is that no matter what you think the final number is for these guys, when they're all healthy and together, it has to be less. Unless the Magic dramatically upshift their speed on offense, which is a possibility, but I would say sort of a smaller one, certainly less than a 50% chance of that. When you add Desmond Bane to the mix, on top of the fact, and again, the Magic were not healthy this year. The guys that were expected to shoulder the workload on the offensive side missed a crap ton of ball games. And it cost Orlando. They were a 500 ball club because of it. Franz missed 16. It was a little bit more than that. was Franz at in missed games this year? Was it 16? I feel like it was slightly more than that. It was 22 games missed for Franz this year. It was more than 30 missed for Paolo. It was basically the season for Jalen Suggs. Like, there was very little time when all three of these guys were rolling together. And if you, I mean, you can find it. You just go back and you set the clock on the Basketball Monster player rank page to the first 2 months of the season, effectively. That was like when they were close to all together. Paolo went down before that. But Suggs was at 13.8 shots during those games. Franz was at just under 19. Paolo was at 19 and a half. They were mostly no, that's not right, because Paolo went down like 2 weeks into the season. So you almost have to just do the first month. Forget the second month. That's too many months. Do the first month. Paolo was at 19 and a half shots. Franz was at 18.2. Suggs was at 13. And that's with a bunch of games of Paolo out already. He had already missed like 10 games at that point. I don't want to say, like, look at the first 5 games. It's too small of a sample size. You could if you wanted to, but I don't think it's a perfect representation because Franz was only at 15 and a half shots during that stretch. Suggs was at 12 and a half. Paolo was still at 19 and a half. This is a very, very, very long-winded way of saying they're just not going to be able to do as much as they did when the other guys were out. Now, to Jalen Suggs' credit, even on only 12 and a half shots per game, he was posting top 40 fantasy value because he was at 2.8 combined defensive stats, which is probably a number that doesn't stick over an entire year. But he does have that floor on defense that Franz has a little bit of. Good at steals, not as much on the block side, that Paolo doesn't really have. But you don't have to worry as much about Paolo because he's going to be the lead horse on the offensive side. He's going to be the least likely to see his fantasy numbers change. But if you're a 9-cat, you probably weren't drafting him anyway, unless you were in a hard punt. So if you're in a hard free throw punt, Paolo, I don't think he's going to shift all that much. I think there's a decent chance that Franz, who, remember, this season overall ended up as a top 40 player, did a lot of his damage. He was a first rounder when Paolo and Suggs were both out at the same time. But again, you had 3 guys now back alongside Franz. And Wagner taking 15, 16, 17 shots a game is more like a top 50 to 70 range guy and less like a top 30 guy. I think there's a chance that Franz Wagner gets a little bit overdrafted. I like the well-roundedness of his fantasy game, but he's not a guy that I'm targeting inside the top 50. Suggs, I think he'll probably go relatively late because he's been hurt throughout his brief basketball career so far. I looked down at my phone in between halves of that sentence and I saw my Little League text thread going and I just yelled the word baseball out loud. Suggs hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy, so I don't think he's going to get drafted inside the top 100, meaning, yeah, you can take a shot on him if you want. Paolo's always going to go too soon in category leagues because his ADP is going to be massaged, we'll call it, by points leagues and punt builds, and that's probably where you're looking with those main guys. I don't want anything to do with anybody else that was on the Magic last year. And then for Desmond Bane, who's kind of the last note on this side and the biggest name that got traded here, he's coming off a season, as we just talked about, a really good one. He's coming off 3 consecutive really nice fantasy seasons in Memphis. And now he's going to a place where he's going to go back to being very clearly not the first option and fighting to be the second option, which was honestly a little bit more like what he was in Memphis this year and 3 seasons before that, where Bane was more in the 14 to 15 shots per game range instead of the 16 to 19. It's a big difference. If you go back and you look at the rankings from 2021, 2022, Desmond Bane had 18 points per game, 4.5 boards, under 3 assists, 1.6 combined defensive stats, very efficient, 3 threes, good percentages, great free throw shooter, all that stuff has pretty much carried through. However, guys didn't put up the same numbers, even 3-4 seasons back. So the fact that he was a top 40 per game ranking guy in 2021, 2022, I don't think is a perfectly accurate representation of what those numbers would be right now. And if you go through and look at what players did this year that were in that like 18 to 20 points range, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, okay defensive stats. You're looking more at a guy like a Cam Johnson, who was at 19 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, zero point 0.4 blocks, very good percentages, low turnovers. Like, that's almost exactly what Bane was 4 years ago. And Cam Johnson was right around the edge of the top 50 this year. So if you think Bane can get to 14 shots a game, something like that, which I think is still conceivable for him, you're probably looking more at a top 50 kind of guy and less at a top 35 to 40 kind of guy. But don't be too scared though. I think there's going to be an overreaction to this for Desmond Bane. I think he's going to get drafted outside the top 50 because people are rightfully expecting a drop off of some kind. But I think it's going to be a slightly smaller drop off than expected. Let's see where he ends up going, and we can make a call from there. I think I may have lied to you guys saying we could get this done in 15 to 20 minutes. We'll try to do it in 25. Let's look now at the Memphis side, and that's where things get real kooky because you replace Desmond Bane with Cole Anthony and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope on a team that's probably going to be trying to get off of other contracts, and you've got a world of weird to think about. This past season, and now we'll just do the okay, what do we make of the Memphis situation stuff? This past season, Desmond Bane was the highest ranked Memphis Grizzly from a fantasy standpoint, although he and Jaren Jackson were basically the same. They were close enough where you're in that there's no real gap between them kind of thing. Both of them late third rounders. Depending on what site you're at, you might even have them flip-flopped and JJJ in front. Jaren Jackson, 16.5 shots per game. Desmond Bane, just under 15. Ja, around 18. Ja was number 88 in 9 category leagues. If you were punting turnovers, 8-cat, he was obviously a whole heck of a lot higher. Santi Aldama was the 4th highest ranked Grizzly at 112 in 9-cat. He was taking about 10 shots per game. Got off to a blistering start, and then as we all expected, kind of cooled off as the season went. Zach Edey was number 134, but was better as the season went on. Scottie Pippen Jr. was very much the high-low guy on this team, depending on what guys were in and what guys were out. But by and large, other than Ja Morant, who missed 32 games, the Grizzlies' other main dudes in Bane and JJJ were relatively healthy. Jaren Jackson missed only 8 games, so played about 90% of his team's action. Desmond Bane missed 13 games, which isn't great, but, you're still talking about between 80 and 85% of his team's games. That's still a pretty good number. Yeah, you could click down some of the Aldama, Bane, JJJ usage, and certainly the Scottie Pippen Jr. usage with the Ja Morant 32 games missed stuff, but we got a decent look at what the Grizzlies would be when all the pieces were there. If you're playing Dynasty Leagues, this is not the show for you. If you're playing redraft leagues, certainly the first thing that happens is you just wait and see what the Grizzlies do the rest of this offseason. So for me to come in here and be like, oh, this is the guy, well, okay, that's great on June 17th, but it might not be in 3 weeks. Is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope going to be relevant in Memphis? I don't think so. And he's probably a guy that they're going to attempt to reroute. I don't know exactly how long they have to hold on to his contract before they can do it. That's a collective bargaining deal. It might be immediately. I probably should have looked that up. But if this is what the Grizzlies are doing, and they got a haul for Bane, make no mistake, they set a full rebuild in motion with one trade if they want to, and they might not be able to move the other guys. I would think that if they really wanted to, they could, but they got to make sure that they get the right amount of stuff back for them. Now you have to look to see who picks up the slack. Is it going to be somebody that's already there, or is it going to be somebody new? One would think that they give a look to someone like, I don't know, a Jalen Wells, who played 79 games this year and took about 9 shots per game. But perhaps it could be Cole Anthony. Perhaps it could be Scottie Pippen Jr. I don't think it's going to be Pippen. I know that that's kind of cruel of me, I guess. But if this team is really going to start to look and see what else is around, they would probably play some of the new things, like a young guy, like a Wells, like we talked about, or someone that they picked up, like a Cole Anthony. Right now, and I hate that this is the answer, right now the answer is it's a bit of a logjam. You're replacing Desmond Bane with possibly 2 or 3 different guys all trying to scratch for the usage. My hope is that it's Cole Anthony. I don't think that Jalen Wells has particularly translatable fantasy game, at least not yet, and maybe it'll get better as he goes. Scottie Pippen Jr., we've seen do it, but he kind of needs to be the point guard, so to get the assists on top of the steals, because otherwise there isn't a ton left to his game. Cole Anthony's the guy that doesn't have a lot defensively, but he can score, rebound, assist, and so you sort of pile on the popcorn numbers, and if you give him enough stuff, he would get it done. Right now, I don't think anybody steps into the 15 shots that Desmond Bane took. It's crazy to say, but Santi Aldama might actually be the true quote-unquote winner right now, only if we're classifying winner as the guy who goes from being not startable daily to a guy that might now be startable daily. Because you just give him an extra 2 shots per game, and Aldama taking 11.5, 12 shots instead of 10 is inside the top 100, whereas Scottie Pippen Jr., even if you gave him a bunch of playing time, I don't know that his shots would go up all that much, and I don't know that his assists would go up all that much. Jalen Wells would score more, but inefficiently and not doing a whole lot else. Cole Anthony has a shot at it, but he's going to have to sort of play his way past these other dudes. And then certainly the other thing, and this doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the Desmond Bane situation, but if you're looking at kind of what happened for the Grizzlies down the stretch this year, you'll want to see. I think there's a big think that I'm throwing out there, but I think you're looking at a situation where Zach Edey probably gets a better look this coming season. It feels like though one of those kind of it has to be, right? Question mark. He was decent. Edey was like top 110 last 25-ish, 26, 27, 30 games this year. So they were giving him more down the stretch. Last 15 games, he played 23 minutes, and he was just outside the top 100. So he was right on the cusp. I mean, 105 is the ranking over the last 15 games. That's startable. 9 points, 9.5 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, decent percentages. That's startable. So John Morant, always going to be a little bit overdrafted because of the popcorn stuff. But again, if you're punting turnovers, he makes total sense. Desmond Bane, not there anymore. JJJ, I would assume, should be fine. We just need him to block shots, but a very safe Jared Allen corridor, kind of early corridor center if you want to get him in the 30s instead of the 40s or 50s. Scottie Pippen Jr. is the big question mark there. Is he going to get enough point guard playing time to be a top 100 guy? I think there's at least a shot of it. Zach Edey is a guy I would want to take with a late round pick. And then, if you're looking at your 13th, 14th round pick and we don't really have any data yet, you could go Cole Anthony and just see what he looks like in training camp. I mean, we'll probably, he's one of those ones where you'll probably learn more about what the Grizzlies are doing during the run-up to the season. So have your fantasy drafts late, ladies and gentlemen. That'll give us more data on what the Grizzlies are planning on doing. But in the short term, John Morant, punt turnover guy to target. JJJ, very safe, early Jared Allen corridor center to grab. Scottie Pippen, Cole Anthony, you're probably watching more training camp, but each of them I would think would be worth a last round flyer. And Zach Edey, I would go a little bit earlier there. You're looking at more like probably a 9th round kind of selection, and we'll see where he goes on draft night as well. Super boring background for today's show. I know, we just left the tweet up the whole damn time. Shout out Shams for letting me just use his tweet for 24 minutes. He doesn't know. I'm Dan Vespers. Like, rate, subscribe on the way out. We'll do something tomorrow. We're figuring out about flying by the seat of our pants at this point. Whatever it is, I'll see you then. Later.